Have you ever pondered why so many seasoned individuals awaken around 4 o'clock in the morning and struggle to drift back into slumber? You might lie there in the tranquil shadows, gazing at the ceiling, wondering what's amiss with your physical form or your intellect. The reality is, this occurrence is far more prevalent than you imagine, and it's not merely a random custom or a consequence of advancing years. In this presentation, we're delving into 5 profound explanations why individuals tend to stir awake around 4 o'clock in the morning as they mature, and what those pre-dawn awakenings might be attempting to convey to you. Each explanation uncovers something more profound about your physique, your health, and your journey through existence. By the conclusion of this discussion, you may perceive your nighttime repose in an entirely fresh perspective. These aren't simply superficial justifications, they are fundamentally rooted in genuine physiological processes, psychological dynamics, and the rhythms of maturation that most people are quite unaware of. We'll discuss alterations in biological compounds, slumber patterns, wellness hurdles, and even emotional and social influences that could be subtly at play. And we'll do it in a manner that's sincere, empowering, and profoundly respectful of the life you've led thus far. So, if you've ever found yourself rousing around 4 o'clock in the morning and asking, why now, you're in the appropriate place. Remain attentive until the end, because what you uncover here might not only aid you in achieving better rest, it could help you more fully comprehend and appreciate what your system is currently experiencing. Let's commence. 1. Diminished somnolence creation. One of the clearest reasons mature individuals awaken in the dead of night, frequently around 4 o'clock in the morning, is the inherent reduction in somnolence production that accompanies age. Somnolence is the compound that helps govern our slumber-wake cycle, often termed the body's intrinsic chronometer, and it plays a pivotal role in assisting you to both initiate and maintain sleep. When you were in your younger days, your system likely generated a robust, consistent quantity of somnolence each night, enabling you to relish long periods of deep, uninterrupted restoration. But as the decades progress, your system begins to generate less of it, and that alteration can have a tangible impact on how profoundly you rest. You might still doze off effortlessly at dusk, especially if you've experienced a full day or a peaceful evening, but by the early hours of the morning, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, sometimes 5 o'clock, that natural supply of somnolence can plummet too low to sustain you in that tranquil state. You may discover yourself stirring not due to a loud sound or a dream, but because your cerebrum is slowly transitioning back toward alertness without sufficient somnolence to hold you in slumber. This isn't an indication that you're doing something erroneously, nor does it signify that your physical self is malfunctioning. It merely indicates that your internal chemistry is transforming with the passage of time. What's more, your sleeping quarters ambience can exacerbate this effect. Even minimal amounts of illumination from a street lamp beyond the pane, a pulsating chronometer on the nightstand, or a corridor light filtering beneath the portal can further suppress somnolence. Your system becomes more susceptible to environmental prompts as you age, which can make that 4 o'clock in the morning awakening feel all the more aggravating. Consider for instance, Mr. Douglas, who is now 72 and always considered himself an excellent sleeper. Lately though, he finds himself fully awake around 4:15 a.m. most nights. He doesn't feel agitated or disheartened, just completely aware, as if it's time to commence the day. Once he grasped that this wasn't a personal failing, but a customary aspect of maturation linked to somnolence, he ceased self-blame and began adapting his practices. He now maintains his sleeping area in a darker state, refrains from illuminated screens an hour prior to retiring, and takes a brief twilight promenade to reinforce his natural daily rhythm. These minor alterations help signal to his system that it's still nighttime, and while he still awakens early occasionally, he's learned to cooperate with his physique instead of contending against it. This kind of comprehension can be a true revelation. When you understand that stirring early might not be your fault, but rather an inherent chemical alteration, you can undertake measures to bolster your repose instead of resenting your physical form. That's the potency of mindfulness. It transforms exasperation into empathy, and it assists you in making more judicious selections about how you tend to yourself at night. 2. Altered rest cycle and forward sleep phase. Another substantial reason mature individuals tend to awaken around 4 o'clock in the morning is due to a natural modification in the body's internal timepiece, a phenomenon referred to as forward sleep phase. As we age, our daily rhythms commence shifting forward, which means we may begin to experience drowsiness earlier in the evening and awaken earlier in the morning. You might observe yourself nodding off during a late-night broadcast or rousing without an alarm at dawn, even on days when you wished you could slumber longer. This alteration isn't just a matter of habit, it's profoundly ingrained in biology, and it can become more pronounced with each passing year. In earlier years, the body's rhythm is often synchronized with a later bedtime and a wake-up time that feels more in tune with the solar cycle. But as this rhythm advances, the slumber window naturally shifts forward. You may doze off at 9 o'clock in the evening or even earlier without conscious intention, which signifies your system has already completed its full cycle of rest by the time 4 o'clock in the morning arrives. That's why you might discover yourself wide awake in the middle of the night, feeling as though your rest is complete, even if it's still utterly dark outside. This doesn't imply there's something amiss with you, it simply means your body is now functioning on a distinct timetable. Consider it akin to a chronometer that's been gently recalibrated over the years, ticking ahead a little more each season. And while this isn't detrimental, it can be vexing if your way of life, household routine, or personal preferences don't align with this new rhythm. There's also a subtle psychological facet to this change. Many mature individuals reside in quieter abodes or spend more time in solitude, and that serene environment can amplify the body's signals to unwind earlier in the day. Without the constant activity or clamor that might have once postponed bedtime, your system initiates its nocturnal shutdown process much sooner. And if you're no longer engaged in full-time work or adhering to a rigid daily routine, the absence of external time cues like engagements, transit, or social gatherings can strengthen this internal shift even further. Let's consider someone like Mr. Harrison, who is 68 and recently retired. He frequently dines around 5:30 in the afternoon and views the evening news for an hour before heading to bed. By 9 o'clock in the evening, he's asleep, and by 4 o'clock in the morning, his system is naturally prepared to rouse. In earlier years, the body's rhythm is often synchronized with a later bedtime and a wake-up time that feels more in tune with the solar cycle. But as this rhythm advances, the slumber window naturally shifts forward. You may doze off at 9 o'clock in the evening or even earlier without conscious intention, which signifies your system has already completed its full cycle of rest by the time 4 o'clock in the morning arrives. That's why you might discover yourself wide awake in the middle of the night, feeling as though your rest is complete, even if it's still utterly dark outside. This doesn't imply there's something amiss with you, it simply means your body is now functioning on a distinct timetable. Consider it akin to a chronometer that's been gently recalibrated over the years, ticking ahead a little more each season. And while this isn't detrimental, it can be vexing if your way of life, household routine, or personal preferences don't align with this new rhythm. There's also a subtle psychological facet to this change. Many mature individuals reside in quieter abodes or spend more time in solitude, and that serene environment can amplify the body's signals to unwind earlier in the day. Without the constant activity or clamor that might have once postponed bedtime, your system initiates its nocturnal shutdown process much sooner. And if you're no longer engaged in full-time work or adhering to a rigid daily routine, the absence of external time cues like engagements, transit, or social gatherings can strengthen this internal shift even further. Let's consider someone like Mr. Harrison, who is 68 and recently retired. He frequently dines around 5:30 in the afternoon and views the evening news for an hour before heading to bed. By 9 o'clock in the evening, he's asleep, and by 4 o'clock in the morning, his system is naturally prepared to rouse. As we mature, the likelihood of contending with chronic ailments or subtle health challenges escalates, and many of these conditions have a way of disrupting slumber without sounding blaring alerts. They infiltrate quietly, like a throbbing joint, a distended bladder, or a sudden pang in the back, and that's often sufficient to rouse you from a restful state right in the middle of the night. Conditions like joint inflammation, for instance, can render lying in the same posture for hours uncomfortable. You may not perceive the discomfort when you first doze off, but after several hours of stillness, those aches can intensify enough to prod you awake. For others, nocturnal stomach acid reflux may stir them from slumber, particularly if they've dined too late or reclined too soon after eating. Even something as seemingly straightforward as aridity of the mouth, muscle spasms, or a minor fluctuation in room temperature can trigger a light awakening around the early morning hours, when your body's defenses are already more susceptible and less forgiving than they once were. One of the most pervasive physical reasons older gentlemen awaken at 4 o'clock in the morning is the necessity to empty the bladder. As we age, the bladder becomes less elastic, and the urge to relieve it can manifest more swiftly and frequently. You might not sense it during the day when diversions keep your mind engaged, but at 4 o'clock in the morning in a dim and quiet chamber, that sensation becomes impossible to disregard. And once you rise and move about, even if it's just to the lavatory, your system may have already transitioned from deep repose to light vigilance, making it more challenging to return to slumber. There's also the matter of prescriptions, which many mature individuals take regularly for blood vessel pressure, cardiac health, or discomfort management. These medications often entail collateral effects like frequent urination, shifts in body temperature, or heightened sensitivity to sound or illumination that can subtly impact slumber. You may not even discern the correlation between your remedy and your rest pattern until someone indicates it or you commence monitoring your customs more meticulously. Consider Madame Evangeline, for instance, a 76-year-old lady who has always been a relatively light sleeper. Over the past year, she began waking up consistently around 4:30 a.m. After months of presuming it was simply aging, she consulted her physician and discovered that one of her prescriptions was influencing her fluid retention levels and increasing her nocturnal excursions to the lavatory. With her physician's guidance, she adjusted the timing of her dosage, incorporated a few lifestyle modifications, and now rouses less frequently and returns to sleep more readily when she does. The crucial point to recall here is that physical awakenings don't signify your physical self is failing. They are, in fact, indications that your body is still performing its function. It's reacting, alerting, adjusting. These signals can guide you toward enhanced care, more informed decisions, and a deeper sense of reliance in your own perception. Stirring at 4 o'clock in the morning may feel like an inconvenience, but it can also be a gentle prompt to attune, to check in, and to enact minor alterations that support superior health and more profound repose. 4. Daily patterns that alter your rest rhythm. Another potent but often disregarded explanation why mature individuals find themselves awake at 4 o'clock in the morning lies in long-established daily practices, minor routines and selections that, over time, subtly reshape your internal rhythm. Many older individuals naturally commence dining earlier, winding down sooner in the evening, and experiencing less physical activity during the day. These seemingly insignificant adjustments accumulate and can signal to the body that the night should commence earlier, which inevitably propels the awakening time earlier too. When your days become quieter, particularly following retirement, your body no longer receives the same external cues it once depended on, like commuting, completing errands, or engaging in physically or mentally stimulating tasks. Without those cues, the body's slumber-wake cycle may begin to drift forward. A tranquil, dimly lit evening with minimal stimulation can cause your cerebrum to produce somnolence earlier, inviting slumber before you've even realized the chronometer has struck 9 o'clock in the evening. And once you're asleep earlier, your body simply concludes its rest earlier, rousing in those still pre-dawn hours, often precisely around 4 o'clock in the morning. There's also a subtle connection between meal timing and the quality of your repose. Dining early, while generally beneficial for health, can sometimes lead to a decline in internal sugar levels overnight, especially if there's no light refreshment prior to bed. That dip may not manifest as hunger, but it can still rouse the body from slumber. Similarly, a stimulating beverage consumed even in the early afternoon can linger in your system, particularly as the metabolic rate decelerates with age, subtly lightening your slumber and rendering you more vulnerable to awakening at any disturbance. For someone like Mr. Percival, who is 74 and recently retired, these alterations crept in gradually. His days became less structured, and his evenings more relaxed. He found himself partaking of supper at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, dozing off in his easy chair during the evening news, and heading to bed before 9 o'clock in the evening most nights. Without realizing it, his entire routine had shifted a few hours earlier. Before long, he began waking around 4 o'clock in the morning, perplexed as to why he was wide awake before the birds even commenced their melodies. After contemplating his routine, Mr. Percival began enacting minor adjustments, incorporating a brief stroll in the afternoon, perusing in brighter illumination during the evening, and eschewing naps after supper. These modifications helped nudge his natural slumber window just a bit later, allowing his body to settle into a rhythm that aligned more closely with his desired awakening time. What's remarkable is how frequently we disregard the potency of routine. Our bodies crave rhythm, daily patterns that act like signals, instructing the cerebrum when it's time to rest and when it's time to arise. As those signals weaken or shift, the internal bodily chronometer can lose its bearings, leading to earlier and more fragmented slumber. But by noticing these patterns and making thoughtful adjustments, it's feasible to gently guide the body back to a rest cycle that feels more revitalizing and less disrupted. If you're still observing this presentation and finding these insights valuable, please comment reason number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't yet joined our community, I encourage you to subscribe and activate the alert bell so you don't miss any future presentations. Your backing assists us in continuing to produce beneficial content to enlighten and motivate you. Now, let's proceed. 5. Emotional and psychological disquiet. Occasionally, awakening at 4 o'clock in the morning has less to do with the body and more to do with the psyche. As we mature, emotional strata that were once concealed by the bustle of daily existence can begin to surface in the quietude of the night. These early morning hours, when the world is still and diversions are scarce, often become the stage where unspoken concerns, regrets, or aspirations begin to stir. You may discover yourself lying awake not due to sound or discomfort, but because your mind is silently sifting through recollections, unresolved thoughts, or subtle anxieties you didn't realize were still with you. This type of disquiet is distinct from the full-blown apprehension that might strike in youth. It's quieter, more contemplative. It can feel like a soft hum in the background, a sensation that something is unsettled, even if you can't quite articulate it. The mind, when not actively engaged, often reaches backward into past relationships, former decisions, losses endured, or words left unsaid. And because the body is no longer rushing from one obligation to another, there's space for those thoughts to echo a little more loudly. It's also crucial to acknowledge that solitude can play a role here. For many mature individuals, social circles contract with time, offspring relocate, companions become occupied, and routines change. The daylight hours might be filled with light and activity, but nighttime brings quiet, and with it, an awareness of that emotional void. This kind of loneliness doesn't always feel oppressive. Sometimes it manifests simply as a yearning for connection or a faint ache for someone to converse with when the dwelling is still. Consider someone like Madame Serafina, who is 80 and a widow. During the day, she remains occupied tending her floral beds, telephoning her grandchildren, and viewing her cherished programs. But around 4 o'clock in the morning, she often finds herself awakening, her thoughts reverting to moments she shared with her late companion, or to worries she keeps tucked away during the daylight hours. Initially, she believed something was wrong with her slumber, but over time, she came to comprehend that her early awakening wasn't about sleep at all, it was her spirit yearning to be acknowledged. To support herself, Madame Serafina began maintaining a small journal by her resting place. When she awakens, she sometimes inscribes whatever is on her mind, nothing elaborate, just a few candid thoughts. She also incorporated a serene evening ritual, like listening to gentle melodies or penning a brief note to a companion. These small acts of contemplation and affiliation provided her emotions a tender outlet, soothing her mind and aiding her return to slumber more peacefully. The truth is, the human spirit doesn't adhere to a strict timetable. It recalls what it desires to recall, poses the inquiries it needs to pose, and sometimes accomplishes all this at 4 o'clock in the morning when everything else is quiet. But that's not a flaw, that's an indication of profundity. If you find yourself rousing and feeling contemplative, it might signify you're bearing wisdom that's prepared to be recognized. You've journeyed through elation and sorrow, and those encounters shape not just your recollections, but your very sense of self. Rather than perceiving these awakenings as something to rectify, try approaching them with inquisitiveness and compassion. What is your mind attempting to communicate to you? What do you need to articulate? What facet of you requires a little grace, even in the gloom? Sometimes the most significant kind of repose arises not from disregarding these moments, but from honoring them. In doing so, you may discover not only superior slumber, but a richer comprehension of yourself in this phase of existence. Concluding reflections. As we conclude this presentation, take a tranquil moment to ponder what you've just heard. What resonated with you the most? Was it the alteration in your internal chronometer, the subtle shifts in your health, or perhaps something more profound, an emotional rhythm that only reveals itself when the world is still? Each of these 5 explanations offers a distinct perspective through which to comprehend your early morning awakenings, and none of them suggests something is flawed or broken. In fact, they each disclose how profoundly your physical form and intellect are still functioning, still reacting, still adapting as you navigate this phase of existence. There's a quiet strength in understanding what your body is attempting to articulate, especially in those soft hours before dawn. Rather than perceiving 4 o'clock in the morning awakenings as an annoyance, you might begin to see them as communications, gentle signals reminding you to listen a little more attentively to your necessities, your customs, and your spirit. You're not isolated in this experience, and you're certainly not the sole individual seeking resolutions. But with discernment comes fortitude, and with fortitude comes the liberty to enact minor, significant alterations that bolster superior repose, deeper comfort, and a more robust bond with your own rhythms. If you've identified with any of these explanations today, know that you're not merely aging, you're evolving. And with that evolution comes an opportunity to rest more deliberately, to care for yourself more gently, and to greet each sunrise with a bit more comprehension and serenity. Thank you for joining us today. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Leave a remark below and share one thing you learned today and how you intend to apply it in your life. Your thoughts are paramount to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Perusing your remarks provides us with great motivation and encouragement. If you relished this presentation and found it beneficial, please like, join our community, and disseminate. Your backing assists us in continuing to produce valuable content to enlighten and motivate you. Thanks for observing, and we anticipate seeing you in the subsequent presentation.